And I've found, like with yoga, we just get people started just on something like that. And I've gone years with doing 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. And then when I have a little more time, maybe the weekend, I find an hour class or something. And when I have, and then when I have a little more time later, I do more. But it keeps you in the game. That 15 to 20 minutes can be enough.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, northern British Columbia. And today we have a very interesting guest from the United States, Colorado. His name is Dr. Eric Holsapple, if I said that correctly. And
Close enough.
okay, and Eric has a very interesting background, entrepreneurial. His family, or he grew up in Maine and on a campground, worked on a variety of different, as a young entrepreneurial individual, worked for K-mart, was involved in auto dealerships, and then studied during his college days. He earned an MBA, actually, and went into real estate, and then at the same time he went back to college again, did some more working for a business in the early 80s, an Australian company, and then went to the University of Colorado and got a PhD in economics, I believe.
Yeah,
Eric.
Colorado State University, actually, but yeah.
Oh,
yes.
So tell us a little bit about, other than that, about your background, growing up in Maine, and you started out being already entrepreneurial, and
Yeah, that was kind of genetic, I think. We grew up. I just we worked the camp store or whatever. I just kind of got business. I wasn't much of a student back then, but I got all of my probably all of my motivation and approval through work. My dad worked, and he taught us to work. So he taught coach football in the winter and basketball, and then he worked second jobs and had a camp in the summer, and we just grew up working. So that's what I knew. And when I got through college, I worked a couple jobs to get through college, and then went into real estate. I worked. We all worked, everybody. That's what we did. So I worked my way to the top there. And but my story was really, I didn't have a lot of meaning. I had a lot of stress. I was overweight. I drank too much. All that stuff. I was successful, but inside I was dying.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, just to tell you just a little bit about myself, you're also an author, I believe.
Yeah, I published a book this last year called Profit with Presence, the 12 Pillars of Mindful Leadership. Yes.
Okay, so I grew up in Holland. I was born in, actually, November the 1st, 1940. And so in another 2 weeks, I'll be 83. So I grew up during the war years, still remember well the liberation of Northern Holland, or Holland, by the Canadians, April the 12th, 1945, made an immense impression on me, and from that point forward, I always knew I would go to Canada, the land of my heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
and then my dad, it was a tough go actually in the war years. My dad was called into the Dutch army in April of 1940, and then the last time they heard from him, about him, he was caught in the bombing of Rotterdam. They didn't know if he was dead or alive for 5 years. I was born in November, but my sister was 1 year older, my brother 2 years older. So things were tough.
Yeah.
And I remember well the periods that there was no food, there was lots of anxiety, bombs overhead, and then at the same time seeing much more than we should have during the war years. And as we are being exposed to the things in the Ukraine and Israel and those other places, war is bad, 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 especially for families. And it's not so that the war is over and then everything is back to normal. No, it may well take a generation, sometimes more than that. And so what we do here is November the 11th is Remembrance Day. During that week, I always make sure that I am a speaker at least to 2 to 4 schools. Some in southern British Columbia, some in the north. Remembering the young people about how fortunate we are to live here in this time, and then why it is so important to remember. And I've done that for the last 10 years. I believe it's very important, and it's an obligation that I feel I have to share this with, in particular, the younger people.
Yeah, we've been so sheltered here in the United States since, since the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Uh, they stopped the draft shortly after that. And so we've been a very, I remember my older brothers having draft numbers and friends that went and whatnot. But we've had, for the last 50 or so years, we've been in a bubble here. And it's breaking.
Yeah, exactly. The other part, for me, I was not very successful academically. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And so they then said, what are we going to do with this guy? And, so they maybe considered, my parents were fantastic, beautiful people. They said, well, maybe send him to the mentally challenged school or get him a job. So they fortunately got me a job working in the furniture factory. I was 14 and became a furniture maker, and then was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for about 30 months, and then worked in another lumber company for about 3 years. And then my dream always, I didn't feel very good about myself. I thought I had failed because all my friends that I went to school with, when I became a laborer, although I'm proud of that now, but then you were looked down on it. A lot of my friends went to college and to university, and so were not directly associated with me anymore. And I felt that I had failed, and so I decided to go to the land of my dreams, Canada, and I wanted to start with nothing. So I took 1 suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and then I wanted to build a lumber mill. That was my second dream, going to Canada, building a lumber mill. So I arrived in Vancouver. Fortunately, I couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. I went to the immigration department. Fortunately, there was a German fellow there, and I could speak some German, and I told him what I wanted to do. He said, Prince George. That's where you have to go. They're building sawmills, lots of timber around there. That's where the opportunities are. So I went in the bus, 12, 13 hours, got off the bus here, and I had exactly the 1 suitcase, 2 sets of clothes, 3 books, and I had $25.47. But what I did have, but my employees gave that to me actually. I had attitude. I always stay positive. I always look at the glass as being half full. I had passion and spades and work ethic. I worked the hardest, and I still, even at 83, do that today. And starting with nothing, I'm not doing a hoorah thing here, but then fairly quickly I became a superintendent of a sawmill here, a year and a half, and within 2 years I managed the sawmill, and in 10 years I started a company, and then from there and then we just kind of grew, fairly rapidly to having a fairly big company that does a deal in lumber manufacture. We are doing warehousing, distribution and logistics, and another silo is real estate, both residential, commercial, and industrial. And so
real estate primarily anymore, but I've done a lot of different. I have my fingers in a lot of different things, but real estate's my
Yeah.
go-to.
Yeah. So the other thing I just wanted to kind of let you kind of know a little bit about me is that, you know, what caught my attention is obviously, you know, you had an interesting background that became obvious, not to the full extent, but at least we find out more about that, and you already said some things about it in the introduction. The benefit is to have a parent or grow up in a culture where you worked, you gave it all that you got, and that was demanded and that was expected. So with me having a fairly interesting background, you know, everybody said to me, you should write a book about this. And so for 20 years, I started and stopped and started and I stopped. And then I knew with the last 5 years, if I didn't do it now, it's never going to happen. So I wrote an autobiography, Against All Odds. And it's not it's an autobiography, but it's not hurrah, hurrah, John, but it's more about the challenges along the way, and you know, going down and then starting up again, and all the other things that I did along the way, and then the other part that makes it somewhat interesting, likely, is in my case. So I still never felt good about myself. Everybody said to me, oh, you're so successful and blah, blah, blah. I didn't feel that way. I felt I had been a failure. You know, coming right from Holland and not having the education, at least not in the school setting. And then at one point I walked into a store in 1997. I was already here for 32 years. And I picked up a book, and the book said, I still don't know why I did it. I opened the book, and the book's title was Driven to Distraction.
Yes.
ADHD.
Yeah. They didn't have that when we were kids. They didn't have that when we were kids. We were just bad kids.
So what I did, when I saw it, I caught onto it, and I said, oh my God, that is me. So I bought the book, and I wrote in the book in Dutch, because I was ashamed of it. You know, now I finally know who I am. And
so I came through that because my kids were diagnosed with it.
Right.
And so where did they get it from? So I read that same book, and I had like 122 of the 127 characteristics or something of that. And I said, oh, geez, I didn't know until I was 50. I thought I was a bad kid.
Yeah. Well, it caused for a long... Sorry,
you're
Harry.
a bad kid.
Yeah. So for a long time, it affected me that I felt I had failed. And that went with me. And the reason that I came here is because we were liberated by the Canadians. The second one, I wanted to do my own thing, start from nothing, and so that I could prove to no one else other than me that I could do it. And so, and I did it. And then, but I did still not feel good about myself. I still had been a failure until about in 1997, when I found that book and I started looking at it. The more I looked at it, the more I researched it, the more I thought, oh my God, it's a superpower. And so I went to our doc, that was a personal friend of mine, as well as of our family, delivered our two daughters. I went to him in 1962, and he said, why are you here? I said, I think I got ADHD. So we did the due diligence, and yes, I do. And so then, especially in the book Against All Odds, I wrote about 5-6 years ago, quite popular actually. And then the second book that I wrote is ADHD Unlocked.
Oh, cool.
And so I wrote it from the mind of an ADHD individual. And so the book is easy to read. You can start it anywhere, go back or forward, wherever you want. Very, very popular. And, so I did that. And, and then the other part that I'm also quite involved in doing keynotes all over the place and presentations, that I include it a lot of times in my presentations, not solely for that purposes, but I talk about entrepreneurship, business, and all the other things, ADHD and all that sort of thing. But it's not only the typical characteristics of somebody with ADHD being attention and the normal schooling structure doesn't work well for us, is that I believe it also applies to people that have been affected by trauma. Or the other part that I say is that although the indications initially was that about 8% of the population is affected by ADHD, I believe that it is closer or in excess of 20%. And that everybody, you will have it, not only you, but anybody, that's what I usually say in my presentation, you will have it in your circle, either in your home or in your friends or in your workplace. So people with ADHD tend to be different. So read the book, at least you will understand them better. But I believe it is a superpower.
I think it's probably worse too because of all the technology and social media, and they all flipping, and everything's just a flash of something. We don't dive deep into anything. We just get a nano thing. So I think it's probably worse now than it was when you and I came up through, because there's so many of the societal factors are not focus. They're anti-focus.
Correct. And then the interesting part that you may find that since you read the Driven to Distraction, Driven by Dr. Aldewell, he contacted me 2 weeks ago. He's going to be on our podcast, I think, in 2 weeks or so. So it's kind of came full circle. And
Nice.
so in any event, that gives you, I'm very entrepreneurial. I'm even at my age still, I'm very active in my companies. I try to stay fit, and I'm trying to live till about 120.
Go get them. Awesome.
Yeah. So that's kind of my background a little bit more. Tell us more about you in terms of your started entrepreneurial, obviously, and then you got your MBA and then your PhD. So are you still very active in business, or what do you do now?
Recently, and I'm just making a shift. I'm older than you. I'm 65, but I think I'm older than you.
Yeah, interesting.
So I had a little split. I came out with an MBA in the mid '80s here, and went into real estate and went on, as I was sharing a little bit in the intro. But and I worked for another firm, but I was really lost. I was successful on the outside. I had the title, the Mercedes, the apartment, and all that stuff, and I was really good at what I did. But I had to make some changes, so I left that company and I applied for my doctorate after, I don't know, I was out about 10 or 12 years of school, going back and relearning algebra and things. I remember that was something. But in about that time too, so I went off on my own, started my own gig, and I found yoga, which was something that really helped me. And yoga was my first entry into mindfulness, and then later I found meditation. My oldest brother was estranged from my dad. My dad was a football coach. He was a poet. And they fought, but I just watched my brother take up some meditation and get back closer to the family, and then come closer to my dad. And I saw him just open up, and I saw one person change, and it changed everything. So he said, "You want to try it?" I said, "Sure." And that was really impactful for me. So I did get out with my doctorate, went back and did my doctorate and worked kind of on the side. And I had 2 kids and then a third right after that. And I started in earnest in Northern Colorado real estate developing, and taught part-time at the Colorado State University for about 20 years, and helped them start their real estate center, and taught there. And I always thought, because I joke too, because I always joked, I didn't get very good grades as a high school. I was lucky to get into college. I'm not sure. I think my dad called somebody. I don't know how I got in, but I was always joked that I was teaching there, and I wouldn't have been able to get in the program. They were in this day and age, but I was a pretty good teacher. And then I started our company, and it one after another, we just infused mindfulness into it with different things, with working on nonprofits and on boards and those kind of things, and the real estate center at CSU, and it was a really good ride.
Yeah,
Then later started living in the Gap, training other people in it, and then wrote the book this last year.
yeah, and then and like for myself, if I will send you copies of my books, and I will
Really
sign
awesome.
them. I will sign them
Yeah.
for you. If you read my
Well,
book, there was I show it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly in between. I was very successful, but there were periods that things were becoming very, very difficult. One period where I drank too much, and fortunately, before it went too far, as a lot of people did, I was brought to my senses, basically by the wife that I married. She hit me with the 2x4 across the head and said, "You're done." And so that kind of got my attention. And so since that time, that was in 1992, I never drank again. So but there was a tough go, and there were some periods in there that it was a real struggle. The other thing that I was battling with, Eric, is that because possibly of feeling that I had failed in school, I was not overly good at communications, and up to about 1990, I could communicate well with about 3 or 4 people in my setting, but not beyond that well. And somebody dragged me to an organization called Toastmasters, and that kind of changed my life. And you're likely familiar with it. Is
yeah,
I
yeah, I'm familiar with it. Yep.
I stayed there for 10 years, came to the highest level in Toastmasters, it being distinguished Toastmaster, and that kind of changed my life in combination with understanding ADHD, and then in combination with that, the ability to create more confidence in myself,
Yep.
feeling that I did succeed, and not saying hurrah, hurrah, but at least I came at peace with who I was, and that then kind of helped me at quite an old age already, because I was 62 when I was diagnosed with ADHD, and then up to 2000 I was in Toastmasters. The combination of all of those things kind of brought me to another area where I became much more involved in public speaking. I do a lot of keynotes now all over the place, and and then obviously I became an author. And amazingly, even with my background, as you will note, I'm a pretty good author and a good writer. Amazingly.
Yeah, the story isn't that odd, actually. There's just so many I know in our area and whatever. So many business people got started. They just didn't have the patience, or they didn't get the rewards in schooling. They just stepped out and did it. I think I went back. I got my doctorate because, similar to you, I think didn't feel good about myself. I mean, I barely. My dad was the superintendent of schools, and I barely got through high school.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, into my teeth. And I think I felt bad about that. And one thing about ADHD too is, it's almost impossible to study something you're not interested in.
Right.
If you're like, I found economics in college, and it just like turned on a light switch for me. It was like, this is how the world works.
That probably is the secret, Eric, because with me it is the same. I was very good in numbers. I was very good in writing, but all the other things I wasn't. A lot of times I was there. I wasn't even there. I would not. If somebody said to me, "What did you talk about in the last hour?" I have no idea.
Yeah, my
So
boys, I have two boys with it too, and it wasn't dissimilar. It was just, I just had to try to help them find something they were interested in, and hopefully that would, I've got a boy. I mean, I joke that eighth grade was the toughest 3 years of his life, and he's writing his final chapter for his dissertation in psychology. Once he got into something that he was interested in,
That's the key.
he's a brilliant. But if you sat down and try to fit him into a mold of standard science and standard this and standard that, he couldn't sit through it.
No.
But yeah.
Yeah, and
So
the key is finding that area of interest where you can focus on, and then you're very good at it. Like so I want to show you one more book that I did
please.
is that I find a lot of times that, and I had it with my own kids as well as a number of other people that I know. They don't know, what are you going to do? I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. So, and they say, well, it is so critically important that you give thought to that. And I know so many people that don't like what they are doing. I say, well, change. Because if you don't like it, then you take that home and it becomes part of your world. So I wrote this book, came out in July, actually. I'll send you a copy of this one too. Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream.
Yeah.
And that kind of talks about that part.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Yeah, so I'll send you a copy of that too. And then I'll give you one more example. You will like this. Is that the other book that I'm writing is coming out in July next year, and it's Living Young, Dying Old, and that is saying becoming informed on all the issues around diet, and I'm sure you are all into this as well. Diet, staying fit, mentally, physically, and to get to that age, not being old, but being physically fit, or healthy, or enjoying life, so. I know so many people, they are 40, 45 years old, and they say, I'm done, so, and I say, no.
That through yoga, not just the physical postures, but the philosophy. The Hindu and Buddhist philosophies of yoga were just amazing to help me go down that road.
Quality of life, right?
Absolutely.
So
learning to body and take care of your body. Being aware of it makes you want to take care of it.
Yeah. So what happened? How did you get to yoga, Eric? Because I'm asking you the question because I'm quite involved going to the gym. I'm a competitive bodybuilder, the oldest one in North America, they say. So but I know what brought me there is simply because I came close to death once in 2008. I had diverticulitis, and I came about that close. And that gave me a shock. I had to do something in terms of physical exercise and and diet and all the other things, healthy living.
I had mine at about 31 years old. I was traveling all over the place.
Right.
Western Canada, England, all over the U.S., all those things. And I was an athlete, but I hadn't been to the gym in 5 years. Hadn't run. I couldn't have probably found my sneakers. I had a tie, I couldn't get the top button done. I had the belt that wasn't, the pants weren't buckled, but I wasn't giving up. And finally I got a transfer to Boston, and they were having a lot of problems with the New York Stock Exchange company there. So they shipped me to Boston and said, can you go help us there? And the good news was there were enough problems in town I didn't have to travel.
Yeah.
And I bought a scale, and I stepped on that thing, and there weren't scales where I was hanging out in the bars. And I looked at that thing, and I remember looking in the mirror. It was that shock. And I'd been having some chest pains and different things. I said, you got to make some changes, or you're heavy. You got to make some changes, or you're not going to be around very long. Exactly. I was shocked, and I stopped drinking for a time. I lost some weight. I started running again, and I just I don't know how I found yoga. I think I just looked at a picture. I mean, there weren't studios all over like there are now. And I bought a DVD, and I just started on my own, and it was just like, instantly I said, geez, I really like this, and I just practice it almost every day since. I just do a little bit of it, and it helps me with everything.
So you have a discipline, though, right? You must have created a discipline but I find a lot of times I have to have a trainer because all my days are meetings, and I have to have that. Once I have the meetings, I will go, and
I have a trainer for weights because I think. But the other thing I learned through the program that I run, and we do a lot of yoga in it, is it's not for everybody. So what we try to do is then say, okay, will you try yoga for a month and find those mindfulness things about how to inhabit your body, how to train your consciousness, and let's teach you how to take that to the weight room, how
right.
to lift a little more mindfully, or Pilates, or running, whatever it is that you like to do. It isn't yoga necessarily. It's
No,
the philosophy of yoga. It's the philosophy of consciousness and how you inhabit, how you share, how you become more conscious of, well, first you get out of your head and then you get in your body and then you can be more conscious of the whole world. But it's like, different refuges. And I found the body is the first best refuge for getting out of the craziness of my mind.
right.
Sit in a meeting and it's going crazy. I'm just notice myself and my body and my feet on the floor and I'm breathing. It's all right. That's okay. I
Yeah,
don't have to go crazy.
right. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So the other thing that I kind of look at is, and I'm working now on my book, Living Young, Dying Old, is saying that, they, and looking at so many new things in terms from a medical perspective, not so much as losing the current medical system, but what else can we do to be preemptive as we go forward and create awareness of diet as well as exercise. And what I usually say is that it doesn't require doing what I'm necessarily doing. I may train 10, 15 hours a week because I've chosen to follow bodybuilding. But as long as you do 20 minutes to a half an hour a day, then it
So,
will keep you in shape.
yeah. And I've found, like with yoga, we just get people started just on something like that. And I've gone years with doing 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. And then when I have a little more time, maybe the weekend, I find an hour class or something. And when I have, and then when I have a little more time later, I do more. But it keeps you in the game. That 15 to 20 minutes can be enough.
And
It keeps you going and doing something.
and then how about diet, Eric? What do you think about it?
There's just so many different ones. My wife's on one now, and she's been on for about 5 years. She has one meal a day. It's the intermittent fasting. She says, "I wish I didn't like it, but it
Right.
works for me."
Yeah.
So I mostly just work on smaller portions. I've done a lot of fasting. I've done vision fasts, and I've done the intermittent fasting and whatnot. But the thing that works for me best is just not filling up, eating less.
Right.
Moving,
Yeah.
just get up. Your stomach doesn't fill up for 15 or 20 minutes after you stop eating.
Right.
So stop here, go start, doing something else,
Yeah.
and that's a habit too. I found that food so much is just another distraction, just like our phone and the TV and the
Exactly.
news and everything.
Yeah.
So
But
it's become so much more than nutrition. It's keeping us entertained.
but again, it's very important to understand it, right? So my wife
Yeah.
is vegan and very proactive in healthy living, but healthy eating as well. I call myself 80/20. I usually don't eat red meat. There are a number of other things that I don't do, but I'm aware of what I eat, and I do the same as you do. I'm not a heavy eater. I'm not the big portion type of an individual, and so that part again. The physical exercise and then the food, and then to be mentally healthy is also very critically important. And
Stress
so
leads to
that's
such much of
yeah,
a bad diet. And the other problem I have is, I've always had is if I travel a lot, it's so much harder. Because you just don't have the options, the good food options, and you're in a hurry and you're doing this and that. So, but stress is something I don't think, it just drives us to keep nibbling and doing and trying to reduce the stress in those other ways. So it can be overeating can be a symptom of that.
you see, I've been fortunate in a way, although I go through a company, we're building things, and I'm always active and proactive, and so somehow I kind of like that environment of having challenges and being stressful. It doesn't affect me as much as it does a lot of other people.
Hmm.
And saying, the people say to me, well, you should not do that because it gives you, how do you call it, a stomach ulcer or so. I said, no, I don't get that. I give that to other people, so keep the pressure on, but being, the other part that I find important is sleep. And while I'm working on this other book, living young, growing old, it's all areas that we are much more proactive in those areas than we were, say, even 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, sleep has always been a difficult one for me. I don't operate on a lot of sleep, 6, 7 hours. But I have when I'm actively, solving a problem, in a project or in a company and have a problem. I mean, one reason that I'm successful, and I know I got this from my dad, I don't sleep.
Yeah,
I and so despite doing a lot of mindfulness and, I get up in the night, maybe meditate, whatever, and I sleep a lot better than I used to, especially because I haven't drank in 15 years either. That used to make it worse,
right.
the sleep.
Yeah,
Uh, but I also don't, I can operate on 6 hours of sleep really well. Different,
right.
everybody's different, with that, but it's something I have to work on, and I have.
Yeah, usually what I do is I like somewhere between 6 and 8 hours, and then on the weekends I may sleep. Where normally I get up when I'm here up north. We have a place in Victoria, the lower
Uh-huh.
part of British Columbia, and so on the weekends I'm there. Friday afternoons I go there, come back here on Mondays, and usually what I do here is I get up at 5:30 in the morning, and I always kind of feel like I'm late, so I'm always in the hurry, always make my bed, and then usually I try to sleep between 7 and 8 hours if I can, so yeah.
We have a place in Maine where I grew up, a camp, and I was just there earlier this week, and my wife was just saying it was that we sleep so much better there. It's on a lake and it's more restful, and I don't have the schedule that I have because I think that's one reason we're successful is we set a schedule and we we run it,
Yeah,
and so we're trying to relax in that same environment. Sometimes it's tough because we've conditioned ourselves to move the world, to move things,
yeah.
and that takes something.
So what we do is we have a place in Victoria, North Saanich. Are you familiar with Victoria? You been
Not
there?
really. I
Oh,
know of it, but
it's
I'm
Vancouver
not.
Island. I when we fly in there, I say it's paradise. The weather
Yeah.
is not too much, maybe very little snow. Not like here. It gets pretty cool here at in the winter time. And we have my wife, myself. We ride English dressage, so we have 6 or 8 horses, and so it gives me a place that I can kind of relax, and then because the first 30 years that I was here building my companies, I work 24/7 as long as I can stay awake. And so to get that break has helped me.
My old partner, Don Morostka, used to say, I work half time, 12 hours a day.
I like that. Yeah. And if you still can do it, and I do that in a lot of ways when I'm down here, you're really 12 to 14 hours if I have to, but but then get the break on the weekends, So what are you doing? Where are you? Are you still very involved in business and entrepreneurship and coaching and doing all of those things now?
I'm transitioning more out of the real estate, and I'm still doing a lot of coaching.
Yeah.
That's where I get my kicks. That's where most of the real estate stuff now is more investments that are, landlords and that kind of thing that are easier, take less time. And I was an active developer. We used to build shopping centers and those kind of
Wow.
things, which is, it's it's a full-time gig, when you're doing it.
Yeah.
So I'm doing, but I run a leadership group every year, a 9-month program. We're just approaching halfway in this year's program where we have a group of, and it's focused on business professionals, just how to be more mindful, how to make a bigger difference, how to have less stress, how to have the life of your dreams, and be successful.
Right.
Be really successful without all the stress. And I get such a lot of joy out of that. So
Yeah. Very rewarding, right?
it is. It
So
is.
is it a company then that you do that, or are you part of a group that does that, or you do that
You know,
individually?
nonprofit. It's a nonprofit called Living in the Gap that we've
Okay.
established. In our company, it's underneath our real estate firm and a nonprofit. We also do some things in there like coats and boots volunteer, where we bring coats and boots to anybody in grammar school that doesn't have them in the city, things like that. And we do some other nonprofit work,
Right.
which I found to be, totally complementary to the career, that you just meet so many people on a different level when you're out in the community trying to do something to move it, than just a business transaction. You just see another side of people and you get to know them, and then just the business just kind of happens with, you just have a conversation with another leader and things just open up and happen.
Yeah.
Again,
I I
stories all over the place.
I like it. Obviously, I do that to a certain extent by doing keynote presentations to young people and business people in different areas. The other thing that I enjoy is podcasting. And obviously about 2-3 years ago, especially after COVID, I became more and more involved in it. So have you been quite involved in the podcasting area?
I am on, I've been on, a couple of week for the past 2-3 years.
Right.
I have the desire to run a podcast. I don't have the desire to have that schedule and that, but I've been really enjoying being on others.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So and I do the same. We usually do between 12 and 15 podcasts a month, and then I'm usually guest on somebody else's podcast once a week. So
yeah,
it keeps me active. But I really, really enjoy it, especially in all kinds of different areas. It's not aimed at a particular group, but it's interesting individuals, interesting people from all over the world.
well, and it's a little deeper dive than what we're getting in the news cycle and everything else now. At least it's a little more thorough of a conversation about things. So many things we get now are just such a clip,
Yeah.
just a headline, just a blurb of this or that, and it gives you a chance to actually get in and have a conversation a little deeper.
Yeah, and
I,
it's so interesting that there I'm sitting here in Prince George, British Columbia, 800 kilometers, 500 miles north of Vancouver. You're in Colorado, northern Colorado, and we can have a discussion face to face about all the things that are of mutual interest to us. It's amazing, yeah, because it's not all that long ago that now 60 years ago, nearly 60 years ago, that I left Holland and with my suitcase, my 3 books, and then my $150 when I left Schiphol and then came here. I would send telegrams to my parents and saying, everything is okay, hope you're okay, send me some money, love John, and that was the communication. Now I pick up the phone, I can just talk to anybody around the world just instantly, and then podcast the same. It's just amazing.
well, I came out with my PhD in '96, and I remember first email that I did was with my advisor, who's a Japanese economist. Was amazing. What's this thing, And look what happened. A few years later, we had the .com boom, and now the whole world's run on virtual.
Yeah.
Just 30 years later, it's crazy.
And then you say, where does it all go from here on in, right? IA or So everything is still, even with virtual internet and podcasting, it's just at its infancy right now, the way I see it.
Well, I think that's one of the interesting issues that we have is our technology is outpacing humans' ability to keep up with it.
Yeah,
Technology, everything's happening faster and faster and faster, yet we're not. We're not. I think we struggle with keeping up with the pace of technology. Now, different people are better at it than others, but with some of the internet and your neural pathways are set, when you're younger. So, I mean, for instance, I still much rather read a book, paper, than read a screen. But a lot
such
of
a
people
yeah,
are now, yeah, it's just the way I'm wired,
yeah.
But so many people read everything on a tablet or a phone. Probably most people are just reading on their phone.
Yeah, I do. All of my books are audio as well, and but I find it just amazing, and and then uh, hearing the things about AI and all that will somewhat change the world in a way. It's somewhat interesting in a way, and then at the same time, if I look at myself, like at 83. I have one fellow that I know is a lawyer, and he doesn't even do emails because he said that's too much new technology for him. So can I say, my God?
Yeah. So yeah. So I don't know where it's going to go. It's interesting, but and there's just hope. I hope we're able to have a conversation about it because the other problem that we have, of course, and I think it's global, is we can't even have a conversation about how we regulate something like AI, so we take the good out of it without having it be
Yeah,
something that threatens our existence.
yeah,
As well, we can't even seem to sit down and have a civil conversation about that.
yeah. It's there very much, and it will never change. So it will just grow from here on in, and yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. Eric, what else comes to mind, before we are approaching our hour?
Uh, I don't know. It's just good to talk to you. It's good to hear what you're up to, and then it's motivating to see you get going at 83. I had a mentor named Larry Kendall that I taught with at CSU for years, and he was a real estate guy. And I watched him in his 60s just transform himself and start another company, a marketing company that he ran, changed everything nationwide. It didn't start until he was 65. So it's motivating to watch you go, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah,
It's
and
inspiring.
yeah. So in the we are on the web and all of the major media, and I like to stay in touch with you. And I'm gonna send you the books. We'll
Great.
get them out
Send
in
you
the.
mine.
I
I'll
I
send you mine.
I like that, Eric.
Great.
It was my pleasure, and hope to talk to you in the future again.
Thank you very much. Hope we run into each other.
Take
Appreciate
care.
it.
Thank you very much. Take care.